Welcome to Hope Academy. My name is Mr. O, and today I'm going to be starting on the ACT Practice Exam 5. This is the last exam of the series per se from the ACT website. The link is provided below in case you want to access this. But that being stated, I'll be going over specifically numbers 1 through 3. Usually when I go over these questions, I usually take my time, actually solve it real quick, and then I take my time to explain how I was able to get to the answer so quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for number 1. I think it's 5 numbers. The mean and median is 4 to 5 numbers. The mean is equal to median. Okay, 4 to 5. 14, 8, 16. Okay. So 8, 14, 16. And then let's just say x for now. Okay. So mean equals to the median. That's the important thing. Okay. Okay, so we got 52. 52 plus x divided by 5 equals to that median value. So let's see. Put it here, for certain it's going to be 14. If I put it down there, it's still going to be 14. Okay, so 14 times 5 equals 270. Okay, 70, 52 plus x. So x equals to 18. Okay, so for number 1, my final answer is going to be E. And now I'm going to explain to you how I was able to get to this answer. So the first thing I did when I looked at number 1 was that I underlined the key information that they provided. And these are the concepts you do need to know, mean and median. Okay, these are concepts that you most likely learn either in along the way in just generally math. It's not really emphasized, but it is something you should be familiar with. But it's also a statistical concept. So mean usually means the average. So that means I add up a bunch of values and divide by the number of those values. So like, for example, if I have 5 different test scores, I add up those test scores and I divide it by those number of those test scores that I have. Median is always, I remember it as the middle number. And so for this question, when I set it up by setting it up in order. So I see 8, 14, 14, 16, and x, because x is my unknown 5th value. When I was thinking about what possible values could x be, this didn't really help me because I see that all the values could be possible. There was nothing unreasonable per se. But the thing I realized was that if I choose x and x is lower than 8, or whether or not x is going to be greater than, whatever not, I knew right off my median has to be 14, because this numbers, no matter where the order is for this x, will end up causing this to be my median or middle number. And so right off, that's where what I did was I added up these values, 8, 14, 14, 16, and I understood there's 52 plus that x, because this is unknown value, divided by 5 scores, because 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 5 different scores, will equal to 14, since I know that the mean has to equal to the median, and thus I just solved for x afterwards. I multiplied 5 both sides, found 52 plus x equals to 70, and then subtracted 52 both sides, and ended up realizing x equals to 18, which is E. I mental math most of this part, so it helps me sort of, having that practice will help you if you want to solve this faster. But that being stated, that is what the answer I got in the end. And so that concludes my explanation for number 1. So now I'm going to continue on to number 2. And because number 2 is a bit big of the answer, you might not see everything, but I'll explain afterwards and show you the rest. Okay? So for number 2. Okay. Negative. Just a negative each side. This will stay. Okay. So it'll be F. Okay, so for number 2, my final answer is going to be F. And now I'm going to go ahead and explain to you how did I get to the answer. So they talk about this as being the h of x. I think this graph, if I remember correctly, is actually going to be 1 over x type of graph, or similar to it. But that being stated, it's not exactly that equation, but I could just sort of have that image in my head. But that's not the important thing about this question. The important thing is this negative. What does a negative do? So usually when we have a negative in front of the function, it's what we call an amplitude. Okay, it's part of what we call the amplitude. And how amplitude, when we have a negative value, basically does, it flips things around. So it will be flipped over the x-axis. The whole graph will flip over the x-axis and will create sort of like that mirror effect. And so right off, that's where I see is going on. Where f, for example, it just has that mirror effect. Be aware for the other choices, for example, like B, the asymptote or this dotted line looks like it shifted from the original question. The original question looks like it's somewhere around like 1 or 2, but this one looks like it's at -1, which is not correct because the point of negatives in the end is that it only flips the graph itself. It does not change the total property or everything about the graph, including asymptotes. It does not do that. That's not how the amplitude works. It just does, it basically flips it over the x-axis when it's in the very front like this, and that's why F makes the most sense, because it flipped this part right here upwards and it flipped this downwards like a mirror, and that's why for number 2 that is my final answer. To continue on to number 3, so I'm going to go ahead and get set up because number 3 is also a big question that takes up a lot of space. Okay, so number 3. Okay, so this equation. Okay, to prove that, to prove this, HI equals to FE, which the following is true. Midpoints. Okay, HI equals to FE, so 5. This one's gonna be my last step. Okay, so it's not these. Let's see. So they told me that G's the midpoint. Okay, so I need that. So it'll be something with the midpoint. So 1's in front for certain. Okay, I'm good. You see 2, but I need this first. I need to clear the vertical angles before I could do that. So 1, 4, 2. Okay, so for number 3, my final answer is going to be D. And now I'm going to go ahead and explain to you how I was able to get to this answer. So this is a concept called the 2-column proofs. This is a concept usually covered in geometry. It's called the 2-column proof. And usually, column proof. Oops, there's another O in there. But the way that 2-column proofs work is that I start off with basically what's given to me, the statements that are given to me, which are the very key things are right here. In this statement right here are the things given to me. But it's also understanding that my very last step will always be this statement right here. They say to prove that HI equals to FE. And so because I looked at right down here and I see that HI equals to FE is my step 5 in this chart, that means that it has to be my last step for certain, because that's what I'm trying to prove. And so right off, I knew B and E wouldn't work because 5 is not the last thing. And so wait, let me move that again. So B and E will not work because 5 is not the last thing. So I knew it was either A, C, or D. And I don't have to worry about the first step because the first step already is guaranteed going to be 1. And so I looked at the second step, and it states the second step was going to be vertical angles are congruent. But the only way I could prove that angle EGF is congruent to IGH, and I'm going to follow the order of the 2-column proof that they provided. But the only way we could state that vertical angles are congruent is first by declaring that these angles are vertical angles. That's the important thing that we needed to declare, which is step 4. So step 4 has to come before step 2, that I could state that they are congruent. That's why D was going to be my answer, because that's the only option that has 4 in front and then 2. And that concludes my explanation for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, so that we could continue to make content like this. I hope you have a wonderful day.